Earlier this year, Microsoft announced that they were attempting to buy Activision Blizzard for $69 billion. This means the makers of Call of Duty, Overwatch, Diablo, Candy Crush, and more will be under the thumb of Xbox. I said attempt because outside looking in, this deal shouldn't be a problem. But with this being the largest tech acquisition ever by several times, it's gotten some side eyes on the legal side as well as some heavy opposition from the likes of Sony. Hello world and all who inhabit it, it is I, the Great Sayran, and I'm here to break down the Microsoft Activision acquisition because I really can't seem to find a recap of it anywhere online. And also this thing has been a huge mess and just keeps getting messier. I'm sure that by the time I edit and post this video, something else major would have happened, so hopefully this video can serve as a jumping off point. First, I really want to talk about Xbox this generation and why I think they're making this move. Then we can get into the timeline of events and then my personal thoughts on this whole thing. Xbox has had a slow start this generation. After delaying their big name launch title Halo Infinite, they really didn't have much to be excited about. Your staples of various sports games, Call of Duty and Forza Horizon, great game by the way, all came out but wasn't much to move the needle and Xbox needed a power play. In March of 2021, Xbox acquired ZeniMax Media, the parent company of Bethesda Softworks. In exchange for that $7 billion price tag, they got some previously announced cross-platform titles to be exclusive to Xbox. But a lot of fans on the Sony side of things weren't happy about this, even though Sony does this all the time. That also meant previous PlayStation exclusive games like Deathloop would eventually go to Xbox even though it was a timed exclusive title. That means Sony paid an amount to have this title on their console for a certain number of months or years, and as soon as that was done, Bethesda was going to put that Xbox version out on Game Pass. Games like Starfield and Redfall were now exclusive, but those don't matter as much as they've been delayed out of the launch window and as of right now still don't have a concrete release date. Game Pass is Xbox's bread and butter. Phil Spencer recently announced that it accounts for 15% of their revenue right now and confirmed it is profitable and sustainable, a question fans and critics alike wondered about a gaming subscription model that relied on other publishers to supply games for. Xbox marketed heavily that their biggest titles would be their day one, but there haven't been many major Xbox titles, something the Xbox CEO acknowledged in the same interview. I'm a huge fan of Game Pass. As someone with a family and a full-time job, buying a game means I'm committing to it and I have to finish it to feel like I got my money's worth. And with the price of games going up on PlayStation and now the Xbox side of things, being able to access a library of games for one monthly price is very appealing. I recently discovered a game I was going to buy in my Nintendo Switch was on Game Pass, so I just downloaded and played it there and saved myself a lot of money. Game Pass has a lot of value, and in order for Xbox to increase that value, they need something major to attract the masses, something like Call of Duty. Currently, Call of Duty releases every single year for a premium price of $70. If these games were on Game Pass along with some other big name titles you might be interested in, Game Pass would literally pay for itself. Xbox clearly knows this, and so does Sony, the main opposer to this acquisition. Why buy one of the most popular gaming franchises for $70 on PlayStation when you can get it day one included with your Game Pass subscription along with 100 other games? Call of Duty is important to Sony for 3 reasons. 1. Raw sales. Sony gets a 30% cut of all games sold in their storefront since they're the ones who are providing the audience for you to sell your game to. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 did $1 billion in just 10 days, so you can do the math. 2. You have to pay to play online with these games. So the more people buy Call of Duty, the more people play online, and the more revenue Sony gets through PlayStation Plus, the subscription you need. It comes with other perks, but needing it for online play is the main reason most people buy it. And 3. Sony still has the marketing rights for Call of Duty for a few more years. Now when this deal closes, that doesn't necessarily mean that the marketing rights go away, but they do become less valuable. Call of Duty moves consoles, and having your console's logo right next to this game is extremely valuable. PlayStation had monstrous success with the PlayStation 4, and it was undoubtedly because they had the marketing rights to Call of Duty. Every time you saw Call of Duty, you saw PlayStation. Now, like I said, if this deal goes through, it doesn't mean that Sony loses those marketing rights, but they will become less valuable since this story is so huge and everyone would know that you could play Call of Duty on another platform and for cheaper. A Series S and a year of Game Pass costs less than the cheapest PlayStation 5 console. Add on $70 for Call of Duty and $50 for a year of PlayStation Plus, and consumers will do the math. If you want the highest end Xbox console while not cheaper, it's still a great deal with all the other games included you'd get. Sony may be confident, but they're not arrogant, though an argument can be made. They know that this could hurt their bottom line, and at the end of the day, it's about money. I understand you may be a fan of Xbox, Nintendo, Sony, whoever, but they're not a fan of you. They legally have to do what's financially beneficial to their investors, and if something seems pro-consumer, it's because it made financial sense first and then was marketed to be pro-consumer. All companies aren't evil, but all companies want money, and you know what they say about money and evil. Now that we know the backstory why these two gaming giants are clashing, we can talk more about some of the major events of this deal. January 18th, 2022, Microsoft officially announced its intent to acquire Activision Blizzard in an all-cash deal for $68.7 billion. Microsoft basically wrote a check for the market value of Nintendo and then some for this deal. Even after the acquisition, it would only make Microsoft the third largest gaming company behind Tencent and Sony. The deal was projected to close June of 2023, but after some recent recent events that we'll get into later that may be extended. This wasn't a hostile takeover and apparently was in the works for a while leading up to the announcement. After Activision's rough recent legal history with discrimination, sexual misconduct, and retaliation, if they didn't do something big, the stock would have tanked way more than it had during that time. Activision CEO Bobby Kotick is a demon cockroach and it's hard to get rid of him, but after this deal, Xbox can oust him and hopefully improve the culture and image of one of gaming's most vile companies. Activision Blizzard shareholders approved the acquisition near unanimously in April of 2022, so things seem to be going well. Because of the sheer size of this acquisition, this had to be looked at by several different regulatory bodies. By November of 2022, Saudi Arabia, Serbia, and Brazil all approved this acquisition without much of a hitch, though the Brazil proceedings were a little bit weird. This is where we began to see Sony's pettiness and apparent hate for Nintendo, as well as their fear of this acquisition actually going through. Sony stated things like they can't make a military shooter to compete with Call of Duty and they can't be successful without this game. Sony also said that Xbox would do things like raise their prices, use time exclusivity to wall off competition, and limit crossplay capabilities in order to keep everyone on their platform, things that PlayStation has famously been doing for years. Xbox responded by saying that Nintendo is successful and the market leader and doesn't have Call of Duty on their platform, and also they don't want to make Call of Duty exclusive. Sony then basically said Nintendo consoles are for kids and they don't compete in the way that Xbox and PlayStation do, which tend to have more mature audiences and games. That statement is going to be a reoccurring theme for Sony. We began to see major opposition with the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK. They announced they'd take a deeper look at this acquisition, though most people weren't really worried what the CMA would have to say. At worst, they may require Xbox to release Call of Duty day and date with PlayStation, something they already agreed to do. They even offered Sony something in writing that said that they would keep Call of Duty on their platform. More on that later. The CMA's investigation is expected to close March of 2023, but what's weird is that they seem to be repeating a lot of what Sony said during the Brazil hearing with Nintendo's success without Call of Duty not mattering in this case, and that Xbox wants to make Call of Duty exclusive. There was even a Twitter debacle where it seemed as if one of the regulators was extremely biased to PlayStation, but it was revealed that he wasn't on the regulatory body handling the case, but that didn't really matter in the court of public opinion. It seemed like the CMA was biased to Sony, and regardless of the ruling, it shouldn't be biased one way or the other. The European Commission started their review in September, and we're expected to see more on this in March of 2023, but so far there isn't much to report on. The latest update I can provide on this entire ordeal is that November 11th, 2022, Microsoft stated that they offer Sony a 10-year commitment for Call of Duty to remain non-exclusive to Xbox should the deal go through. Sony denied. Xbox, with the power play, then offered Nintendo and Steam 10-year contracts to bring and keep Call of Duty on their platforms respectively, which they both agreed to. Valve CEO Gabe Newell even stated that he didn't need to sign because Phil Spencer and the games team at Microsoft have always followed through on what they told us they would do, so we trust their intentions and we think Microsoft has all the motivation they need to be on platforms and devices where Call of Duty customers want to be. Like I said earlier, it doesn't make financial sense for Call of Duty to be exclusive to any one platform. Sony responded by saying Microsoft's intent with the acquisition is to remove Sony and PlayStation from competition with Microsoft and instead have the PlayStation platform more comparable to the Nintendo Switch, which Sony stated is based on taking up a family-friendly position and not attempting to compete with adult-rated games like Call of Duty. Also, they said the last time Nintendo had Call of Duty on their platform, it was a commercial failure, and that the Nintendo Switch can't run Call of Duty anyway, and Nintendo may never make a console that can run Call of Duty, hilariously dismissing the agreement entirely. Microsoft did all this right before having to meet with the FTC, who filed a complaint and is suing to block the deal, with one of their main arguments being that Xbox made Bethesda games exclusive after misleading the European Commission that they would do no such thing. The EU responded to the FTC saying they never asked Xbox to do that, nor did Xbox ever tell them that they would. The European Commission having to correct the FTC does make the FTC seem a little less competent, and it may affect the lawsuit as it makes their argument seem a little less credible. The FTC also stated that Microsoft could become a monopoly with all the other dominating products and services they provide, not just with gaming. Personally, I think all this back and forth, while necessary, is becoming a bit tired. Apple, Meta, Amazon, and Google have no problem with this gigantic deal going through because there are still larger gaming entities still. When you look at it, this only hurts Sony, which is why Sony is the only one arguing against this. Call of Duty is on Apple and Google platforms via Call of Duty Mobile, and Phil Spencer has stated that he's really invested in the mobile gaming market, which has 3 billion global users, while the console market only has 200 million. Amazon makes and publishes games with partners like Bandai Namco, but their bread and butter is their storefront. And Meta has cornered the VR market, making it a lot more mainstream than it used to be. This acquisition seems harmless, though I'm not a professional. Microsoft wouldn't become a monopoly, but they would become a huge power in the industry. I think the gloves are about to come off. Microsoft is a huge company with the funds to have a war of attrition with Sony off pride alone. Activision also wants this deal to go through and have some strings they could pull as well. If this deal doesn't go through, it kind of hurts Activision Blizzard. Their stock shot up exponentially at the thought of investors getting a cut of this deal, and if this deal fails, investors will leave. Activision won't totally disappear, but likely have to sell off divisions to stay afloat after a heavy drop in stock prices. They may not be able to make as many games as they do or at the quality that has made them successful. So Sony, the deal's biggest opponent, still loses, while Microsoft can just buy individual studios and make their own similar another military shooter if they so choose. Most experts still see this deal going through, though it may take a little bit longer than anticipated. I honestly don't care one way or the other, but I think it's super interesting what's going on here, and clearly I've been keeping my eye on it. I'll be sure to keep you guys updated, so be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.